Hello and welcome to the HR Like a Boss podcast. I'm your host, John Bernatovich. I have embarked on a journey to get to know amazingly awesome HR and business professionals with the hope to find out what it takes to do HR like a boss. If you enjoy the show, please make sure that you subscribe and hit that 5-star rating. Super excited to have an amazingly awesome guest on today's episode, Craig Lucas. Craig was a keynote presenter at a recent Cleveland SHRM event, and he had emotions that were being, I guess, as I walked in the room after Craig had presented, wow, you have some big shoes to fill following Craig Lucas and his presentation skills. So, Craig, welcome to the HR Like a Boss podcast. I really appreciate you being here.
John, it's a pleasure to be here, and I'm sure you filled those shoes quite well after my presentation that day.
So, Craig, I always start all guests out after they do their brief introduction to share their opinion on what is the purpose of human resources, and I'm so curious to hear what you have to say about that.
Yeah. So I think the function, in my personal opinion, has never been more important to an organization than it is today. And John, we've touched upon in our past conversations where, given the pandemic and what's transpired since, where workers have never been more transient than they are today. And yet I think a lot of organizations feel there's very little control they have over the retention and attraction of talent. Yet I know differently, where a number of organizations that we've been able to work with culturally, they are laser focused on conveying to their employees that they do indeed care about their total well-being, seeing it as both a retention tool and a means to attract talent. So within the HR function today, separate from all the technical aspects of the role and the responsibilities, to what extent can the function successfully engage with the employees and have them feel a sense of connection and alignment where the work has meaning? I think to what extent HR is successful with that within different organizations, that'll go a long way toward them achieving what they want in terms of their goals and objectives.
And I'm curious, Craig, so it leads me into my question about this idea of differentiating yourself in your attraction and retention of employees. What are some of the main pillars of clients that work with you, or some of the experiences you've had in helping employers really create that as a unique differentiator, a strategy that helps them be a competitive advantage against their other competitors, as well as just businesses that they're trying to attract talent against?
Yeah, I think the main thing is, look, I understand that from a training and development standpoint, there are technical aspects where somebody has to perform to those needs to be able to perform the job in question. But I think there's a lot of elements that roll up more to the broader emotional intelligence theme that can be on display that really create that feeling of connection and care, candor, transparency, showcasing vulnerability not as a weakness, but a great show of strength, empathy, and inclusion. I, for one, know personally that you can achieve that safe haven setting where it doesn't take weeks, months, years, decades, but it has to be an intentional pursuit. So I think the very best organizations that I work with, that they're very mindful and very desirous of wanting to create that kind of place for work or to work for their employees.
Yeah, no, I think as we talked about in our conversations before, it's this idea of how we make people feel at work. And if you just take that gauge just for a second to say, okay, how do I think we're making our people feel? And then when you go and ask them in a way that hopefully they feel safe to give you the honest answer, where's the delta at? And my guess is there's a significant delta that exists around, are we creating safe places for our people to work, both physically and emotionally? Are we giving their managers the power to be effective in their role as opposed to incredibly ineffective, so that a bunch of people will leave in droves because I hate my boss? I've heard that once, I've heard it 1,000 times. And then
there's a lack of trust, right? I mean, to me, one of the easiest ways to be able to create a feeling of trust and connection. Can you imagine this, John? What if I knew your top 5 values and why you felt so importantly about those top 5 values. And if you knew my top 5 values and why I felt so passionately about those. If there's nothing more than the sharing of that information between fellow employees or a boss and those that report up, you're already beginning to develop a foundation that can be used to create, again, that environment that I think most people want. I mean, personally, I believe separate from food, water, and shelter, what people want more than anything is a feeling of connection to someone or something that makes them feel more. If I know that and I create an environment with that as an intention, great things can come to pass.
The cool part is, I got to ask you, I assume you have an agenda for your events. You just don't tell people about them before you get there.
That's correct. So we do have an agenda. We also introduce a theme. So we have an overarching theme that provides a swim lane. But what's interesting about the absence of announcing the actual agenda is it allows someone like myself those impromptu, spontaneous moments where whatever we had orchestrated, if there's a way to make it more or make it better, it gives us poetic license to do so. So it's been a big treat. We've been able to go narrow and deep into some very meaningful topics. You know, this idea of appreciation, forgiveness. We are all adaptive was the theme of one of our events, and there's many more. But the idea is to be able to take leaders beyond that which they know about themselves through the power of experience. And I just think that there's a lot of leaders where the skills that take them to the top are not necessarily the skills that'll help them be successful once they get there. And I'd like to think that we're helpful in evolving them and having them be able to connect and communicate with more power, purpose, impact in a way that inspires the workforce.
How would you describe someone that does HR like a boss?
You know, for someone like that, John, I think I know when I'm in their presence and I know when I'm in their absence. If they are just checking boxes and if they're just going through what they do in a perfunctory way, but in a way that doesn't move me, you know, I can sense that. If I am in the presence of someone who is conveying care, they have great pride and enthusiasm on behalf of themselves and their organizations, that's what ignites and triggers whatever they know technically to becoming so much more with legacy in mind. I think those that are champions within the HR realm that are doing amazing work are in the back of their mind, if not at the forefront. They're mindful of their legacy, and that I think that's a difference maker.
Appreciate you being on the show. Thank you for your time.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks for checking out the HR Like a Boss podcast. If it resonates with you, please leave a rating and review, or better yet, subscribe and share with a friend. Until next time, let's continue to aspire to do amazingly awesome HR.